Good evening, everybody. This is Nawaz Modi Singhania of the Body Art Fitness Centers, all about holistic fitness, wellness, and health, the mind, the body, the soul. They're all integrated anyway. They never were apart from each other in any event. So I am very happy to see all you viewers coming in. Welcome all. Thank you for joining us. Today's guest is particularly special to me, and he is a guest with us for a particular reason today that I'm going to unfold to you in a while. This is oncologist, leading oncologist, Dr. Kashyap Patel, who works from the US, and he is joining us today from Charlotte, US. It is, I think, very early in the morning for them. So I want to tell you a little bit about Dr. Kashyap Patel. He is a quadruple board certified oncologist who has practiced medicine in India, in England, and in the United States. He has authored more than 40 papers pioneering oncology research, and has spoken in front of the US Senate on Capitol Hill. He is also invited regularly to the White House to advise on healthcare policy. So I want to first tell you what my connection with Dr. Kashyap Patel is before I let him in. In 2009-2010, my father was suffering with stage 4 cancer and was down six chemotherapy cycles, and it was not going well. He was supposed to take 8 chemotherapy cycles, but by the 6th, his body couldn't take it anymore. He was in the ICU. It was a very, very touch and go situation. His doctors were feeling very despondent and feeling that this was not going to work out. And I was, I can't even tell you how devastated I was. And in the midst of that, I somehow happened to meet Dr. Kashyap Patel. I didn't know him. I happened to go to his son, Mahashri Patel's book launch with my book club. And as he was talking on himself and the fact that he was an oncologist by virtue of being the father of Mahashri, I got very excited, and I was so beside myself with grief that, I went up to him straight after the talk was over. It was a fabulous book launch. And I introduced myself. I told him about myself, my father, what I was going through, and the fact that he was an oncologist. And he said, no, I can help you. Please come to me tomorrow morning and show me all your papers, show me your medical reports, and I think I can help you. This is not the end. And that was very kind of him. He didn't know me at all. I didn't know at that point in time that he happened to be staying with one of my book club members who had taken along with me that evening for the launch, because he was helping somebody else in their family as well, and they had grown to be close. So it was a very happy tie-in. And I went in the next morning immediately with all the papers. He saw me right away. Though I know he was rushed to make his flight back to the US, he saw me right away. He was very kind, and he advised me, opened new worlds for me, which we didn't know existed here in India, which saved my life, saved my father's life at that point in time. And that was not the only point. That was repeated nearly 8-10 years later when my father had a relapse, and once again Dr. Kashyap Patel, the angel, came in and saved the day. I am forever indebted to him, and I'm very, very pleased to have him in with us. So let me invite him in without much further ado. So as Dr. Kashyap Patel comes in, Hey, Doc, good to see you.
Good to see you, Nawaz. How's the weather in Mumbai?
The weather is all corona red, but yes. Well, it is 7:30 in the morning for you or thereabouts, I know, in Charlotte, US. So thank you for joining us. It's 5 p.m. our time out here. I was just introducing you to all our viewers. We have a lot of people in who are very excited about what you have to say. So, Doc, I also wanted to say one more thing about you before we went forward. I wanted
Sure.
to tell our viewers in this vein that Doc has been somebody who's been available to me day and night, despite being continents apart. I don't have to think in these years dealing with my father's cancer. I have never had to think about, will he be available? Am I disturbing him? I message him or I call him and he is always there, which is huge, which is, oh my God, way too precious. So I wanted to say that as well. So Doc, before we start, the big C, which is what you deal with, people have not even been able to say the word. The word gets stuck in the throat, right?
True.
But now it seems that in these days and times, we are up against the bigger C
Another C.
that we don't want to talk about. It's not only cancer anymore, it is also the COVID. So while it is top on mind, would you please shed a little bit of brief light on how patients, cancer patients, can best protect themselves in these pandemic times? Yeah, a few tips.
Sure. So I think, COVID-19 has taught us a lot of new facts of life. First is the how fragile the life is and how we have to value and kind of care and be precious for every second, minute, day, or month that we have. Cancer patients in particular are more vulnerable for COVID by default because the first line of defense of our immune system against COVID-19. So as much as possible, giving my example in my clinic, the moment we saw the pandemic raging through the United States of America, we switched over most of the patients to what we call the telehealth. So instead of expecting them to come to our clinic, we started calling them up, checking them up. And even though I was losing money because not seeing patient, I would lose money, but we decided to really keep them at home as much as possible. Then we started deploying a lot of PPEs. So avoidance of potential exposure to any COVID infested area is what I would do. And what are those? Traveling in a crowded bus, traveling by public transport, sitting inside a bar and drinking next to each other, breathing on each other. These are the situations which make COVID infection go very rapidly. So if you could avoid those situations, that would be safe. And one more suggestion I always make is that we are human beings, we are social animals, and we want to go out and socialize. You could do that as long as you are in an outdoor setting, you are sitting about 5 or 6 feet apart, and you're not coughing on each other. And please avoid contact with someone who's been diagnosed with COVID-19. Now, there's a little weird thing I want to bring up about COVID in India. So I've been telling this since February and March, is that any individual who's been exposed to other family of coronavirus group, for example, we had SARS virus, MERS virus, as well as other viruses, can lead to what we call immune cross-reactivity. So if my body has been exposed to multiple viruses, my T cells are hypervigilant. And that's one of the reasons why you see the difference in mortality in Southeast Asia versus the European as well as the United States, where the exposure to virus is relatively less. And even though we have much higher viral load, case load in India, the mortality is in the range of 2 to 4%. It was in the tune of 10 to 12% in Europe. So these are some of the kind of observational studies that we are doing right now.
That's a very interesting point. Thank you. And yes, the rest of it, we do need to apply better common sense to our cancer
Absolutely.
patients. Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
yeah, right. Thank you. So, coming back to just cancer as it is, of course, the reasons for it, you would say would be stress, environmental, could be diet, could be genetics, could be negative, unworked out emotions, etc. However, in all your years of experience, what do you think the top reasons really are?
Cancer is part of evolution of natural human body's tissue. So eventually our tissues will start degenerating, but there are factors that accelerate. So what you just mentioned, the hereditary predisposition begins that process, but then stress. So stress suppresses immune system. It actually reduces our own innate inner mechanism of controlling the telomerase enzyme. And I'll speak on that a little bit later, but lifestyle changes, for example, in the Western countries, all the cows are fed with estrogen to increase the more milk production, and all the other animals that we people eat meat on, they're fed with the hormones, and the hormones come directly into our body. So if you look into the difference in the countries where the milk is not fortified with estrogen through the food resources, the incidence of breast cancer is a lot less. For example, in South Asia, the incidence of breast cancer is like 1:10 ratio compared to Europe and US, because here all the animals are fed with genetically modified food. So that brings the first thing. Every morning as we start eating, there's one less day that we're adding to our body by eating that hormone fortified food. Then environmental pollution. So look at the high tension wire lines, we look into even the cell phone signals. I think studies have not been done, but I'm sure if you look into keeping the cell phone next to a baby's brain who's developing brain very quickly, has a tendency of emitting those signals that will influence the brain. And that's why we see rise in the brain tumors in certain parts of the world. There was a study done in Europe. It was halted prematurely. We don't know why, but that's possibly the environmental reasons. The carcinogens, the pollution, all of this contribute to the cancer. Now, there's a research that was done by Dr. Apple in California. She got a Nobel Prize for her research. What she showed was the mindfulness-based stress reduction or reduced stress through epigenetics will send signals into your genome, and your genome will have higher level of telomerase. This telomerase increases telomere length, so your longevity increases. So we have a natural innate capacity of increasing longevity by using mindfulness-based stress reduction. And I'm actually applying for a major grant in my clinic to use the 3D VR goggles, insert meditation instruction in that for 30 minutes each while patients have chemotherapy, and then measure their EEG as well as biomarker level that can lead to inflammation. So it all comes back to, yes, we can partly heal ourselves. Eventually it's going to happen what's going to happen, but we can delay the process. We can use some of our own inert mechanism that we have.
That's fascinating, Doc. Guys, I'm going to be loading this video onto IGTV. Like me, I'm sure you'll want to listen to it over and over to really get in the gold that Dr. Kashyap Patel is sharing with us out here. Thank you. And radiation chips, they help? I guess they would help.
So radiation in terms of treatment or in terms of the...
No, sorry, I meant to say radiation chips, and so anti-radiation, which you stick onto your mobile, your laptop, your device, which right. is shown with kinesiology, with muscle pressure, which is shown to be effective.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Anything
I use those.
You can do definitely would help reduce the risk of cancer.
Right. My friend Juhi Chawla Mehta introduced this to me, and ever since that I've been propagating it to everyone and brought it in for all my people, etc. as well. And I feel it does make a big difference, at least on the kinesiology test. Yes. So thank you. I'm seeing a lot of...
I forgot to say exercise. You are actually the biggest. You help people by staying physically active. You produce endorphins.
Yes.
Endorphins
the happy
through
hormones.
Epigenetics will reduce the stress that will increase telomere. So exercise, diet control, and mindfulness are the three fundamental triad how we can reduce the risk of cancer. Somebody who already has a cancer, they can live longer. And I want to stretch one more minute here.
Yay, okay.
Back in 2010, 10 and 11, a major breakthrough came where Harvard and Stanford followed doctors with same stage of prostate cancer. One group of doctors exercised 30 minutes every other day. The other group was sedentary. They found that the group that exercised 30 minutes a day had about 16 months longer life expectancy compared to the control group. And the best drug at the time were increasing life expectancy by about 8 months. So you have own inner way of showing that we can increase longevity even when diagnosed with cancer. The studies in metastatic breast cancer have shown that if you exercise, if you do mindfulness, you do have quality of life and you do increase your longevity.
And exercise also keeps many cancers at bay anyway, to begin with.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's one of the ways of reducing the risk of cancer. If you look into the cancer risk, obesity, lack of exercise, diet, lifestyle, all this put together. So
absolutely,
you're helping so many people away, Nawaz, and you're taking my business away, but I'm okay with that.
Actually, I have cancer on both sides of my family. It's not only my father, my mother as well. So the odds are not stacked in my favor, and therefore I rely heavily on what I do for a living, but also for a life.
So, and I'm just a heartbeat away from you in case you will need a help.
That's very well said. It is actually a heartbeat. Pun intended, it's actually a heartbeat. Yes. Thank you so much for all of that. Doc, would you tell us the difference between immunotherapy and chemotherapy?
Absolutely. So chemotherapy, I call them like a cluster bombs or a napalm bomb. When we were growing up, when there was a war that was going on in Vietnam area, they used to use the carpet bombing, clean up everything. So similarly, chemotherapy is like, it kills every cell. Now, in the hope that cancer cells that divide very fast, they will not get a chance to come back and normal tissue will replace it. It's more like a much more broader kind of killer. So immunotherapy, it works on patients whose tumor expresses something called PDL. Our body has its own capacity, again, to curtail cancer by invoking immune system. And immunotherapy enhances the ability of certain groups of cells to seal the borders around the cancer and reduces the risk of recurrence, increases life. And the perfect example is the US President Carter. He had immunotherapy for stage 4 cancer and is still alive almost 5.5 years in complete remission.
That's fabulous. So a lot of people who cannot take chemotherapy anymore can take immunotherapy very safely, and it's a big lifesaver then.
And of course, you know, in COVID-19 time, what we are trying to observe, we've not reached a conclusion as yet, but we are trying to find a trend where immunotherapy may reduces the risk of cancer patients' kind of exposure to COVID-19 because it boosts the immune system.
Right. So this is, thank you for that. And what is the difference between that and targeted drugs, or is there a...
There's definitely a difference between targeted drugs and immunotherapy. Immunotherapy is usually kind of non-specific in its action. Some tumors express specific proteins on their surface. And targeted therapy is almost like a smart laser-guided bomb. It just goes and attaches to the cell, which carries a signal on top of that. The other basic difference is most of the targeted therapies are oral pills, which is not a chemotherapy. So the side effect profile is a whole lot different. But I want to share a story of one of my friend's son. His father is a senior judge in one of the state high court. He's a chief justice in one of the state's high court. 3.5 years back, he was doing PhD in Oxford, and he got diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And actually, to the embarrassment of everyone else there, they told him that you go home and fatten up and die. I mean, this was what he was told. So like you, they reached out to me and said, Kashyap, do you have an option? So I said, send me a piece of tissue from his biopsy. We had this tissue analyzed in Boston at one of the foundation research company. We found a target on his tumor. So I said, you know, and I'm not raising your hopes, but I think we can act here. So we're able to get him a targeted therapy. He's alive. He got married. He rides motorcycles 3.5 years out now. So this is a story of success.
What a happy story.
Yes.
Yes, fabulous. I've been the happy recipient of many of your happy stories that way myself, in my family, and with my friends and people I consider close. So thank you for all of that. And I want to come to just a little bit of that because, yes, I benefited hugely from that. You have a lot of active R&D happening out there in terms of chemotherapy, immunotherapy drugs, very cutting edge in the US. And could you tell us a little bit more about the trials and the approvals, etc., of the same?
Yeah, just grab the water.
Please, yes. It is a thirsty topic.
Yes. So we are doing a lot of clinical trials to the point that now, looking at the pace in development of the research of the what we call biomarkers or expression on the cell, and the efficacy of treatment, we are actually shifting away from site of cancer. So some cancers, we don't say where they came from. We say they are NTRK fusion positive cancer. So that could be in the brain, that could be in the breast, that could be in the pancreas. So we are now shifting away from site of cancer. Say he does not have lung cancer, he's got ALK positive cancer. So maybe 10 years from now, we will not say his cancer began in uterus. We'll say the cancer was ALK mutant and we use this treatment. So we are shifting away from the macro visible side of the tumor to micro expression of the genomic mutation, which has allowed us to use very effective therapy. And then some of the advantages of these newer R&Ds is, one is that you are able to only select cells that need to be targeted. And second is the side effect profile is much better. And there are lots of research coming out. I would say that 10 years from now, chemotherapy will be a matter of past.
Very interesting. Thank you. Doc, outside of chemotherapy, immunotherapy, radiation, please could you briefly elaborate on the best support system that a patient can really have in different ways for themselves, also from their families, whether it's friends, emotional, environmental, physical, technology even?
Absolutely. So cancer, even though we are programmed to take a reductionist approach of, focusing on the breast cancer, uterine cancer, lung cancer, there's a human being behind it. So we have to realize that we are not treating the cancer, we're treating a human being with aberrant piece of tissue. So our attention should be onto that person's emotions, person's family, their own micro ecosystem. So the treatment should include being part of the patient's ecosystem, which includes their family members, which includes their loved ones, which includes their relationship, because any break in entire ecosystem can lead to adverse consequences. So in our clinic, what we do, Nawaz, is we create what we call a survivorship care plan. And I'll send you one of those sample care plans, which includes how often I'll be seeing that patient once they're done with chemotherapy, how often they'll be seeing the primary care, what are the secondary prevention strategies we will be doing. We recommend exercise, diet, nutrition, counseling, medication if possible. All of these are now what we call evidence-based medicine intervention. So our survivorship care plan does not end writing the medicine. It actually continues for 10 more years after patient is diagnosed into remission.
Thank you. Yes. So you've got a fabulous complete package, very well worked out, and that gives any patient a lot of, and their families, a lot of comfort that you've done this often and done it very well. So thank you on that. So obviously the key to cancer and survival is an early diagnosis if one is going to have cancer at all.
Of course.
And we lay people miss some of the very, subtle signs of cancer. Could you, of course, there are some very common ones, but could you tell us about some people say they're asymptomatic and then they're found at stage 4. So could you talk about some of the subtle signs that we can look out for?
Absolutely. So if someone like me and you, we are living totally healthy lifestyle, and if I start feeling some sort of uneasiness, I can't explain it, but just say, I don't feel like eating, I'm losing weight, I don't have any energy left. These are what we call a non-specific signs of cancer. But then there could be tissue-specific signs. For example, if I have to kind of pause in eating every time because I feel that I need to have a longer time to digest the food, you have to look into whether your esophagus is a problem, your stomach has a problem, or colon is a problem. So any change into your dietary lifestyle, that probably could trigger the concern about the cancer of stomach, esophagus, or colon. Then for women, post menopausal, if they start having unusual bleeding, excessive bleeding, or just some sort of spotting or anything, that could be trigger for getting more tests done. Then, if you start having unexplained cough, if somebody's smoker, when if they start having unexplained cough, that's a red flag, because sustained unexplained cough in a smoker is one of the earliest signs of developing cancer. Same thing happens in throat cancer as well. So someone who's been drinking regularly, heavily, and if they start having some sort of feeling of a foreign body sense in the mouth, these are something that we frequently ignore, but they could be kind of early sign of cancer. And then if you ever feel you're sitting and you feel like some sort of bump or lump somewhere in the body, that could trigger the sign of a cancer. But somewhat optimism in news in that side. I'm advising a company in the US that is on a breakthrough level. Maybe within the next 2 to 3 years, they'll have a test that can detect free floating cancer cells in the blood 2 years before you sign the tissue diagnosis. It's actually, it's interesting, there's something called cell-free DNA. What we figured out is cancer's tendency of spilling the DNA fragments in the blood. And there are 2 companies that have nearly perfected technology, but they'll be going to FDA within 2 years or so, or even sooner, for approval for predating the diagnosis of cancer, maybe a year or 2, depending on the tissue that you're looking for. So technology is taking kind of leaps and bounds.
So more and more help is at hand. Fantastic. Would that be for all cancers or just some of those select?
No, so almost about 20 different cancers, including some blood cancers, prostate cancer, breast cancers. The 20 different cancers could be expressed in the blood.
Okay, thank you. Doc, you are in and out of Washington a lot, and we mentioned that at the start. Tell us, that's very interesting.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit more about your involvement at the White House in their healthcare policy.
So I'm actually incoming president of one of the largest association called Community Oncology Alliance, which is a very strong patient advocacy group, but we are also almost several thousand independent oncologists. And as a part of their lead government affairs person, I've been to the White House, I've been to what they call also the West Wing, which is where the president lives. And I've also been to what we call the executive office building, the Eisenhower Tower, where all of the secretaries work. I've been to those premises several times. And our whole theme has been to maintain the access to cancer care at an affordable rate with a full transparency. So anytime there's a government policy that comes out that's likely to impact access to care for an ordinary person, I don't care about wealthiest people, but my attention and focus has been an average human being who needs that help should not have to compromise on that help. So any legislation that affects that, we go regularly, and we are able to make changes. About 2 months back, there was a major bill that was coming out from one of the lead senators that would impact the access to care safety. I got hold of multiple of my colleagues, and even though with COVID-19, we were able to get in connection with the senator's team members, and we were able to kind of, educate them not to include oncology in that bill. So we are actually quite successful in bringing significant changes that sustains the care at the affordable price with the full transparency.
That's fabulous. I know that you do a lot of pro bono work that you don't like to talk about, and that's the best way to keep it. And if you get lucky and we run out of time, I won't ask you about it, but otherwise I just might, because I know there's a lot there and it's fabulous.
So let me just tell you one thing on that. When I started my clinic when I was in India, my dad said, "Beta, you are not going to make money out of it. That your clinic is like a shrine and temple. Anybody who climbs it should have the access." And I've done the same here. In last 20 years, we've written off about total $30 million of my collectible bills. And I said I could live without that money, but no person who knocks my door should ever be denied an entry.
Wow, wow, and wow. Kudos to you. What good karma you have, Doc. Gosh.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to talk about your father actually a little bit now that you've touched upon it. But before that, I want to tell our viewers that in Doc's first book, it's called From Raindrops to an Ocean. Dr. Patel tells the story of Anne Stanford, a lady who had deep spiritual beliefs and practices and sustained the same. She was delivered through this challenging ordeal with leukemia as a result of that. And because of its focus on the human core experience of mortality, impermanence, and questions about meaning and the purpose, this book will speak to a variety of readers facing serious challenges in their lives, including those that are not facing life-threatening illnesses. And Dr. Patel's account of Anne Stanford's story also appeals to spiritual seekers regardless of their faith. Dr. Patel has a very deep spiritual side and connect, which I want to talk about a little bit later. Right now, I first want to talk about, leading from his first book, coming up to his second book, which is going to be launched in 6 days' time on the coming 5th of September. I'm very excited about that, and very excited to be hosting that global launch as well, but I'll come to that a little later. In that book, and I don't want to give away the book, it's very interesting, and I want to keep that as a surprise for the 5th, but I just want to read out a little bit because it's very relevant to who Dr. Patel is, who he's become, the service, the life he's chosen, etc. So in your book, Doc, there is a passage where you speak about your father, and you have said about your you have said about your father that I spent my formative years under his guidance and wisdom. He, your father, was forced to cremate his own father when he was 4, his own mother when he was 10, and his own younger brother when he was in his 30s. When it was time for him to deliver his own son's eulogy, he couldn't even cry, having lost all his tears to grief long ago. And yet, no matter the extent of his grief, he never gave up his trust, his faith, or his optimism. And he is the source of my strength and resilience. He is the one who instilled fearlessness in me. Fearlessness after all that. Wow. Here you've also just briefly touched upon the loss of your own brother. And it's very clear to see how this has given you your life's mission and the service that you have embarked upon. Would you like to say anything? It speaks for itself. The thing speaks for itself, really. But would you like to say anything briefly on this?
Yeah, my father was an icon of ordinary Indian who grows up in the middle of pre-British era, a son of a farmer who became orphan at a very young age, and then became very successful engineer. But throughout his life, nothing touched me in terms of the materialistic wealth. He was always humanity, but he was very holy and very spiritual. And all his purpose in life is not to monetize your skill set. And as a child, he would always take me out when he was building bridges. I used to travel with him when he was building bridges. He would instill those small, small snippets of life, but I'd never seen him crying. He was not sad. I mean, he was full of emotions, but he was above the personal grief. He never let personal grief came into the position of his duties. And every strength I have today is what I derived from him. The book, let me break one secret in the book is, we all are kind of familiar with Raja Babu, the famous character from movie Anand. When I was 8 years old, I went and saw that movie, and I was crying because, Raja Babu dies of testing. And then I don't cry, you're a smart boy, you can become a doctor and you can cure cancer. Somehow the other it got stuck in. And I never thought the life I continued on the same. And I have to say that, late Rajesh Khanna was probably part of who am I today as an oncologist. Because it made me think about how can I help many more cancer patients. So my life is formation of my dad's path to his path through suffering, instilling of the moral principles that I have today, which is more of a humanity, spirituality, and the devotion.
Doc, we seem to be having some trouble with your signal on your side. If at all you can move closer to your router,
Sorry?
That might help. Yeah, we seem to be having a little bit of trouble on Wi-Fi. If you could move a little closer to your router, that might help. But the audio visual seems to be a bit frozen from time to time.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But anyway, we can hear you right now. Yeah, I can very much see how. Yes,
Okay.
yes, we can.
Okay.
That's very deep and impactful, and yeah, that's. Thank you for sharing that. It's very deep and impactful, and I can see how that would, yes, carve a very strong path forward for you in your life. As they say, life is what happens to you, John Lennon in your book, right? Life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans, and nothing could be truer than when somebody is told all of a sudden that you have cancer. So, yes, I also believe we're coming to a close of our talk, because this cuts off in an hour, so I don't want to miss out on the spirituality bit of this. I know that you're very deep on spirituality, on religion, on meditation, but how does it really help your, and I know there's a very deep link there in healing, in cancer, with your patients in the curative format. So do you also find that those who believe in the afterlife, those who believe in life after life, who have lived their lives very consciously, trying to be good human beings, as we Parsis say, good thoughts, good words, good deeds for yourself. As we call it, manashni, gavashni, kunashni. Do they have, do you think, an easier time with this whole very trying ordeal?
Absolutely. So people who have some sort of belief in some sort of afterlife, it's not about one faith is best and the other faith does not believe. I feel that those people who have a sense of optimism that your life does not end when your physical body dies, they have a little better time of accepting, because then you're looking forward to journey beyond this life. And what I feel, a day will come in science as well that we will start realizing that what we see in this physical incarnation is not the only thing that we are. And if you trace my own journey, Nawaz, I always want to give example of myself. So when I was a fertilized ovum in my mother's womb, I was just a 4-micron cell that could not be seen with regular microscope. And today you see this 2-meter square, 6-feet body sitting in front of you. But all it is there's genetic code in my DNA or a human genome, which knew what elements it has to get together to build up the proteins. And when I perish, whether I get buried, whether I go to med school, most likely I'll give my body to the med school so that people can learn from me, or whether my wife decides to cremate me, the elements will go back to the earth. So we are recycling the elements that gives the visible manifestation, like the brick, mortar, steel, and cement. But the filaments, the DNA filament, which I call entangled five chemicals, which is carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and oxygen, they continue traveling in this space. And when the time comes, they'll figure out a way to come back and express themselves. There's a psychiatrist in Miami, Dr. Brian Weiss. He's actually wrote a book called Many Masters, Many Lives. And he's traced back some of his patients of past lifetimes. So I do feel that the life does not end. I think then that allows me to see and help my patients to understand that if you did not know who you were before you were born, why are you so much concerned as to what will happen to you when you return these borrowed elements? What I am today is these elements are borrowed from Mother Earth, and I'll give it back to her for raising me for all these years.
Yes, very well said. Thank you. Doc, we do have some limited hospice services in India, but not to the standard remotely that they ought to be. And in the US, they're fantastic and they're very advanced. Could you shed a little bit of light on them?
Absolutely. So there was, we do baby showers before baby is born. We do all celebration before wedding. But the only thing that we don't do as a human being is when somebody's journey is definitely time bound, we are not preparing them for a safe, graceful departure. Dying in a hospital, tied down to the tubes, and with the kind of, needles piercing the body, with seeing the sky without unseeing eyes, is not the way we should treat any human being. And hospice services actually help bridge the gap. So in the US, we are not perfect. In fact, I'm going to start a movement around the dying better in the US, because we also have limitation, but at least majority of the people who want to do that, they have access to what they call either home hospice care, where a team of nurses, physician, and caseworkers can go to patients' home. They look at if patient has a hospital bed, because think through this. If my bones have cancer, I cannot walk. How am I going to get out of the bed into the bathroom? So they provide you the hospital bed at home. They'll get you everything that you need so that person will be without pain. Their loved ones will focus on the quality of time that they have left. And the system will take care of their physiological, physical, and emotional needs. And we need to do it very desperately in India. We have to look after our terminally ill patients in a whole lot better way than what we're doing right now.
No question. It's not just a matter of heart and infrastructure. It's also a matter of that's very expensive. And with your with the amount of work that you do, how do you think governments and others can be more sensitized to this issue of needing to really provide a better end-life care?
So we could actually look into creating a model where people who are blessed with resources can look at subsidizing some of the care. And in Ahmedabad, I knew a wealthy family, and even their loved one had the same problem. So I floated idea. They said it's a brilliant idea. Let's look into that. And logistically, it's not that expensive, because if you look into creating a small mobile van, which could be equipped with a nurse and somebody like physician assistant that can go to patient's home, they can hang some glucose bottles, they can hang some pain medicine. It's not that expensive when you look into eventual cost. It's just preparing the logistical model. And I used to run the largest hospice in our state about 5 years back. And I would be very much willing, if there are a number of willing people to establish a pilot, I would be very much happy to devote my time pro bono to just help build up something that would help people die better in their own homes.
Much work there to be done. Yes. Doc, thank you for this. I want to invite all our viewers to
Sure.
Doc's fabulous book launch on the coming Saturday, the 5th of September. It's a global book launch, and so that's global between India, of course, the US, Canada, London, Singapore, and UAE. India
Mm-hmm.
time, it is Indian Standard Time, it is 8 p.m. And it is on the Zoom platform, of course. We're all being very safe. And for any of our viewers who would like to join in, we would love to have you. Please get to bookmyshow.com. It's a free registration, but just to be able to get your Zoom ID and password in, do log in there, and we would love to see you at the launch itself. As I mentioned earlier, this video is going to be loaded onto IGTV. So it's going to be a fabulous, careful hear through again, because there's a lot of very valuable stuff Doc has shared with us that is going to be of great value to us all. So thank you so much, Doc,
Can I
for
just
all
have
of
one
this.
last word?
Please do.
So, the book is all about how we make most of the life. Typically when you hear about word cancer, people start getting kind of frustrated, sad, anger. And when you get terminal cancer, you really feel that life is coming to an end. The way I designed this idea is the book is called Between Life and Death, but it's actually journey from the time that you get diagnosed with cancer and live to the fullest, because what we have no control over is what comes our way, which is cancer. What we have control over is how we can live to the fullest, being realistic, being with the spiritual, being holistic, at the same time doing everything possible aggressive for the treatment. So live the life to the fullest, because what we can't control is what comes our way tomorrow.
Absolutely. And I also love the tagline, your book cover, from despair to hope.
Yes, exactly.
So we all somehow do survive.
Absolutely.
So, yes, thank you so much, Doc. This has been very invaluable. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, all you guys, for coming
Thank
in
you very
and being a
much.
part of this. And I look forward to the next Saturday with you in any event.
Absolutely.
All the
Thank you.
best. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.